Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Greg O'Connor, and I'm the Executive Director here at Kensington Place of Redwood City and North Atherton. We're a dedicated memory care community where we promise to love and care for residents as family. I had a moment of reflection this week as the world was starting to open back up and was in awe of the work that was done everywhere to ensure that love and care for our residents was done present and amidst one of the most chaotic years of our lives. I'm happy to be kicking us off as Jennie Clark guides us through caring for our loved ones with dementia. The information that Jennie is providing during the presentation has been extremely helpful in how I have been guiding families in my professional and personal life. Understanding dementia and how it affects us as caregivers and me as a leader has been fruitful in making sure that I meet the needs of every one of our residents here at Kensington. At Kensington, we have a passion for excellence and quality of care for our residents. We provide 24-hour on-site nursing, high care partner to resident ratios, highly trained and competent team members, enriching and meaningful activities, and a delicious dining entree that includes texture modified and special diets, all in a beautiful and safe environment that feels like home. We partner with organizations that share our values to make the world a better place for people living with dementia and their families. We support initiatives for education, awareness, fundraising, research, and cutting-edge practices, much like Jennie Clark and Stanford's Aging Adult Services. So, some housekeeping items. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to type it in the Q&A box, and one of our team members will prompt it for the end of our session. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to a very special friend of mine, Susan Evans. Susan has been a longtime family member of Kensington Place and has been a solid ambassador in supporting our families as they also deal with their aging loved ones with dementia. Susan?
Thank you so much, Greg. I am pleased and honored to have the ability to introduce Jennie Clark today. My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 10 years ago, and it was 5 years following that we made the very difficult decision to place him in a home. And we chose Kensington Senior Living because of its dedication to memory care. Having my father at home with caregiver support was too hard on the family, and I did not want to lose both my parents to this dreadful disease. I had the pleasure of meeting Jennie Clark 3 years ago. Jennie works at Stanford, where my father was a patient. I am so incredibly impressed with the care we received as a family, from the diagnosis to treatment to continued follow-up care. I thank both the team at Kensington and Stanford that have lessened the burden of this incredibly challenging, difficult journey. Thank you, Jennie, for your dedication to making the lives of many families and patients better each and every day. Now, bear with me while I introduce Jennie, because it's a lot of long words. Jennie Clark is a credentialed professional gerontologist, certified geriatric care manager, certified dementia practitioner, certified Montessori dementia care professional, and board certified in Alzheimer's education. Jennie received her Master of Arts degree in gerontology from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. She has worked with older adults in public, private, government, and nonprofit sectors. Currently, Jennie manages the Memory Support Program at Stanford Health Care and sits on the clinical core for the NIH Stanford Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. She lectures and presents on the topics of person-centered dementia care and caregiving in dementia. She is published in academic journals and has co-authored clinical and research manuals. Please join me, everyone, in welcoming Jennie Clark. Thank you, Jennie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to go. The slides are up. Again, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be here with you all today. And if we could advance the next slide, I want to go over just the outline here. So today we'll be talking about, looks like a lot, and it is. We don't have a lot of time, but we'll talk about some dementia facts. What is caregiving? Types of caregivers, the challenges of caregiving, caregiver unmet needs, the crucial role of caregiving, person-centered care, care planning, and the rewards of caregiving. So next slide, please. So first, let's talk about some facts. Next slide, please. These facts come from the 2020 Alzheimer's Disease Facts and Figures report from the Alzheimer's Association. And I know we're talking about dementia in general. Alzheimer's disease is the most common. So the facts, we'll just start with some of these, but know that dementia affects many more people than this. Currently, we have approximately 5.8 million Americans living with Alzheimer's dementia. And it is estimated that we will have 14 million Americans living with Alzheimer's dementia in 2050. Currently, 1 in 10 people age 65 and older have Alzheimer's dementia. Next slide, please. So what is caregiving? And I imagine that if you're listening to this webinar, you already know, but let's review that just quickly. The definition of caregiving is attending to another person's health needs and well-being. And some of the most common tasks are ADLs and IADLs, which we'll talk about in the next slide, emotional support, communicating and coordinating medical care with physicians and family members, and managing health needs. Next slide, please. So ADLs are activities of daily living, and they are bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting and continence care, transferring, and eating. Next slide, please. And then the IADLs are instrumental activities of daily living, and they are meal preparation. So that includes meal planning, preparation and storage, transportation. So not only driving, but also arranging rides or using public transportation. So having the ability to do that. Shopping, the ability to make appropriate food and clothing purchases. Housework, including laundry and cleaning dishes. Managing medications, so taking medications as prescribed, managing refills, and if you run out of a refill, knowing who to call and how to get that refilled. Managing finances, paying bills, avoiding scams, and operating within a budget. And communication, so being able to operate a telephone or a cell phone and the ability to use email. Next slide, please. So now that we talked about what caregiving is, let's talk about who the caregivers are. Next slide, please. So there are formal or paid caregivers, such as direct care workers, and these are certified nursing assistants, home health aides, and home care aides who work in a person's residence. And then in skilled nursing facilities, these are also certified nursing assistants, and they can assist with things, the ADLs, such as bathing, dressing, food preparation, etc. Adult daycare, that's an adult daycare program for people with dementia. It's similar to a senior center, but it's specifically for a person with a cognitive impairment. So these sites are locked or secured. And then senior living communities like assisted living or memory care communities, just like Kensington Place, where there are trained staff and personnel to help with ADLs and with some of the IADLs. And palliative care and hospice care. Those are specialty care for at the end stages of the disease, or at the end of life care. And those providers are easing the burden on the person with dementia and the family. So they aren't trying to cure the disease, but they're trying to manage the symptoms of the disease. Next slide, please. And then there are informal or unpaid caregivers, who I'm guessing maybe some of you. And if so, you are one of 53 million unpaid caregivers in the United States. These 53 million people are providing 30 billion hours of care, which is valued at over $522 billion. If we compare this to the $211 billion in unskilled or non-nursing paid care, you can get a sense of just how large the caregiving industry is. 83% of the help provided to older adults comes from family, friends, or other unpaid caregivers. 1 in 3 caregivers is 65 and older. 66% are women. 25% are of the sandwich generation, which means that they are simultaneously caring for their children and their parents. And there's even a term, the club sandwich generation, meaning that they're caring for their parents, their children, and their grandchildren. And on average, caregivers spend about 24 hours a week providing care. Next slide, please. So, okay, now let's get to the heart of the matter. So these, we'll discuss some of the most common challenges of caregiving. The next slide, please. One of the biggest challenges of caregiving is the effect that caregiving has on families. Family caregivers often report a lack of knowledge about the disease of dementia and the person with dementia's needs, and they feel unprepared in providing this needed care. Caregiver responsibilities have increased at home due to medical advances. People are discharged from hospitals much sooner than they used to be. So this puts more responsibility on family caregivers. And oftentimes, the family caregivers have limited or inadequate training on how to provide the necessary care. The perceptions of outsiders may affect how open a family is in sharing the diagnosis. Many times, especially in the beginning of the disease, families try to keep the diagnosis a secret, so they may not be getting the support that they really need or that they could use from other people. Many families are unprepared and struggle with finding coverage. They struggle with the financial aspects of caregiving, with end-of-life decision-making, and many are unavailable of the available resources. Many are unsure of the available resources. And caregivers oftentimes, I would say more often than not, become isolated because they have to stop participating in things that they used to be involved in, so in their social circles or their networks, because they need to be home to take care of the person with dementia, or because they're too tired to go out and socialize. Next slide, please. So other challenges that many caregivers face are financial. 41% of people caring for someone with dementia have a household income of $50,000 or less. So they may not have the option to hire paid caregivers. 78% of family caregivers have out-of-pocket expenses related to caregiving. In the workplace, caregivers are losing wages if they have to stay home with a person with dementia. A Pew Research study found that 39% of American adults are family caregivers, and of those, 70% are working. There is the emotional and physical stress of caregiving, which can affect job performance. And then there are the increased health costs for the person with dementia, including increased clinic and hospital visits, medications, tests, in-home care, hygiene and cleaning products, special food for nutrition and hydration, durable medical equipment and home modifications. And the caregiver may also have an increase in health costs because of the toll that caregiving has had on their physical and their emotional state. Next slide, please. There are health challenges that caregivers face. So there's the caregiver burden, which is a measure of emotional, physical, and financial challenges associated with caregiving. Overall, caregivers have lower levels of well-being and physical health. 63% have an increased rate of mortality. Many caregivers have cardiovascular and other diseases resulting from the persistent stress of caregiving. Overall, caregivers have low self-care. Caregivers may eat less healthy foods because it's easier to grab something pre-made or delivered, or because it's just difficult to get to the store if either they can't leave the person with dementia home alone or they can't bring the person with dementia to the store. There may be a lack of or a diminished exercise routine because they can't get out of the house or can't go on a walk because maybe, again, they can't leave the person with dementia home alone, or the person with dementia has physical limitations and can't go out for a walk. There's usually a lack of sleep or interrupted sleep because of the stress of caregiving, or because the person with dementia may have sleep disturbances, which then impacts the caregiver's sleep. And we know that over time, poor sleep can negatively impact the brain, the heart, and overall health. So a great analogy when discussing the effects of caregiving is for the caregiver to think of themselves as a vehicle. And just like if we have a vehicle, in order to keep it working, it needs maintenance and upkeep. And that's similar to what a caregiver needs to keep working. They need to go to the doctor for regular checkups and preventative health. They need proper nutrition, hydration, stress management, exercise, sleep, and support. Next slide, please. So the psychological challenges of caregiving, they're very stressful and demanding. They can lead to burnout and depression, resulting in a high level of caregiver burden, anxiety, the loss of a social life, and a sense of loss for the relationship that they once had with the person with dementia. And these are some of the most common emotions that caregivers face: anger and frustration towards the person with dementia for the high demands and their challenging behaviors, anger and frustration at themselves for lacking as a caregiver, anger and frustration at the disease, and sometimes anger and frustration towards others, either family or friends, for their lack of support in caregiving. Many caregivers feel guilty because they're unable to alleviate the pain and confusion for the person with dementia, or they may feel guilty about the bad thoughts and feelings that they have towards the person with dementia. A very common emotion is sadness, being sad for the loss and the changes in the person with dementia, and maybe for the loss or the change in the relationship that they once had with the person with dementia. I want you to know that all of these emotions are normal, and I think that one of the hardest things about this disease is that it is a long goodbye. For many, the progression is slow, and the person with dementia continues to change and decline over a long period of time. It's almost a constant state of mourning. Next slide, please. Another challenge of caregiving is that it's an ongoing learning process. So once a person receives a diagnosis of dementia, or even sometimes before that, the caregiver has to adjust to the needs of the person with dementia. This means that not only do they have to learn how to be a caregiver, but they have to learn how to communicate in a different way. They have to learn to identify triggers that are upsetting the person with dementia. And they have to change the way that they view the relationship that they have with the person with dementia. So once they have all that figured out, things usually change because dementia is a progressive disease, which means that the person with dementia's needs change. So once again, the caregiver has to adjust to the changing needs of the person with dementia. And this cycle can continue for many years and can be absolutely draining. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about the caregiver and the importance of uncovering their unmet needs. Next slide, please. So the care team, both the patient's doctors and the caregiver's doctors, really need to consider the caregiver as part of the patient's care team because the caregiver has direct influence on the person with dementia. It's crucial to offer a caregiver assessment to better understand the caregiver's situation, including their level of burden, the caregiver's current state of health, the caregiver's needs and preferences, and the caregiver's goals. And when caregiver needs are unmet, the caregiver may experience burden or stress, which can lead to emotional or physical aggression towards the person with dementia. And even when a person with dementia is impaired in their ability to understand verbal communication, they can still pick up on tension, anger, or stress in their caregiver's tone or body language. Also, if the caregiver is not well supported and becomes more socially isolated, the person with dementia also becomes more socially isolated, which can increase their rate of cognitive decline and reduce their well-being and quality of life. Doctors really need to understand the caregiver's perception of the person with dementia's current state of health and functioning so that proper education and resource linkage can be provided. And one of the best ways to support the caregiver and the person with dementia is by developing a care plan. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the most common needs of caregivers that I find in my practice are in the following domains: self-care, learning how to manage challenging behaviors, emotional support, education and consultation, and respite care. And unfortunately, the COVID pandemic has so severely impacted many of these resources, especially in the respite domain, but I'd still like to review them as I'm hoping, just like all of you, that life will return to somewhat normal as soon as possible. Under the domain of self-care, it's very important for caregivers to have the time, the space, and the energy to practice health management in their own way. So through the use of mindfulness, counseling, support groups, attending to their medical needs, caregivers can then moderate their well-being. And some of the national organizations that support these efforts in this domain are in the purple rectangle below: the Alzheimer's Association, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, Family Caregiver Alliance, the Institute of Aging, and the Veterans Administration. Learning how to manage challenging behaviors is also critical to successful caregiving, and we'll explore this in the next couple of slides. So we'll skip that one for now. Receiving emotional support through caregiver support groups and workshops are very helpful in dealing with the burden that caregiving can cause, as is private counseling. And a lot of those organizations in that purple rectangle provide support groups and workshops. Caregivers really need education on caregiving, and they need to consult with experts in the field. So again, those national organizations there in that purple rectangle, along with private geriatric care management companies and community case management programs, can offer that education on caregiving. And then last but not least, respite care. So at some point, almost every caregiver will need respite. And these organizations can assist you in locating respite care in your area. But respite care can also be offered through home care agencies, adult day programs, and state-funded programs such as IHSS or MSSP through Medicaid, and also through friends and family. And one thing that I recommend is that if you do have friends and family that are willing to provide respite care, it's very helpful to be specific. So if you can say, I really need someone to come sit with my husband on this day and this time, that would be helpful. Or if you could just drop by, bring some dinner by, that could be helpful for us too. The more specific you can be, I think that the more willing people are to help. Next slide, please. So I want to really take some time to talk about this. Caregivers play a crucial role in the quality of life of the person with dementia. So next slide, please. A meta-analysis showed that family caregiver interventions had a larger treatment effect on behaviors than antipsychotics. And there's just so much power in that. Caregivers are incredibly important, and that's why we're having this talk today. And I'm starting to get excited because this part of the talk is the exciting part. So multiple research studies have shown that person-centered care reduces difficult behaviors. And in a study of 15 nursing homes of 289 residents, they had reduced levels of agitation because the staff used person-centered care techniques. And I want to just make a point here. Kensington Place, I've been there multiple times. And I think that their person-centered care is the gold standard for care for memory care communities. I just want to say that I think, when we can find community partners and places that are really providing person-centered care, it's the biggest gift that you can give to a person living with dementia. So let's talk about what is person-centered care. Next slide, please. And then one more. Thanks. So person-centered care is recognizing the whole person. It's honoring their preferences and their personality. So in other words, it's not seeing every person living with dementia as just a demented person. It's by seeing behaviors as a communication of unmet needs. It's providing the person with dementia opportunities for engagement in activities that are meaningful to them, even if those activities are not meaningful to us. And it's by including the person with dementia in decision-making and care planning whenever possible. Person-centered care is very important for people living with dementia because this disease robs them of their independence and it stigmatizes them. It disempowers them from participating in important aspects of their life. And overall, it's a disease of losses. People with dementia will gradually lose the ability to express themselves verbally and to advocate for themselves. So by offering person-centered care, you're giving the person with dementia opportunities to fully participate in their lives. And one of the greatest gifts that we can give to a person with dementia is the dignity of risk, which balances providing opportunities for autonomy and independence with supporting safety. So for example, it would be offering someone the choice of drink that they want to have that day, or it could be the opportunity to garden outside, even with the risk of falling. Next slide, please. So the challenge for anyone caring for a person with dementia is to create a world where the person with dementia is known and where they're seen as a person first and the disease is seen second. It's where the person is seen as having strengths and abilities, preferences, a personality, the ability to make choices and to be part of and engaged in as much of their life as possible. One aspect of person-centered care is to see behaviors as a communication of unmet needs. Dementia may cause a person to have difficulty expressing themselves with words, so it's the caregiver's job to figure out what the person with dementia may be saying. So the caregiver must try to identify the unmet need, which may be showing itself as a challenging behavior, and then to investigate the possible cause of the behavior. Some possible causes could be that the person with dementia is hungry, maybe they're thirsty, in pain or discomfort, maybe they're constipated, they may have an infection, or they may be afraid of something. Maybe the caregiver is not communicating effectively, maybe they're talking too fast, maybe they're talking too slow, or maybe they're just treating the person with dementia like a child. The environment may be too noisy or cluttered, which can cause stress. Maybe the environment is too hot or too cold. Or perhaps the caregiver has provided too difficult a task or has given too many steps to the person with dementia, which has caused confusion and frustration. Next slide, please. Another possible cause of an unmet need is loss. And our culture tends to look at someone with dementia as unable to do things, and therefore we remove the opportunities and tasks and experiences from the person with dementia. So people with dementia, I think it's pretty common that they can experience any of these. They may realize that they have lost some of their cognitive abilities. They may understand or see that they're no longer an expert in their field of occupation where they worked for 40 or 50 years. Or they may no longer remember how to do something simple like brushing their teeth. They might not remember what a toothbrush is. Maybe they feel that they're no longer independent and that they're always being told what to do. There may be a loss of productivity. it's important for us to ask, what have they been able to do for themselves today? Did they add value to their life or anyone else's life today? Is there a loss of communication? Are they having trouble finding words, or do they know which words to use? Maybe they forgot what a word means, or maybe they forgot someone's name. Has there been a loss in a relationship? I hear all the time about friends dissolving because, or friendships dissolving because the friends don't know how to handle the changes that they've seen in the person with dementia. Have they lost their well-being or their state of being comfortable, healthy, and happy? And I wish we had time to go into all these a little bit more, but for time's sake, let's take a further look at the well-being. The next slide, please. The Eden Alternative Domains of Well-Being is one of my favorite tools in helping caregivers identify losses and unmet needs of the person they're caring for. So as previously stated, unmet needs can trigger difficult behaviors, resulting in caregiver burden and in the poor quality of life for the person with dementia. So this framework provides the opportunity for person-centered dementia care by honoring the whole person and their well-being. The caregiver can apply each of these domains, one of these domains, to the person with dementia's current situation. So for example, if you can think about the person that you're caring for right now, how would that person describe their identity? Is their story known and understood by all who are caring for them? Does their identity extend beyond their physical health and the tasks that others are performing for them? How would the person you're caring for experience growth in their current situation? What is in place to help enrich their life? What dreams and goals have they expressed, and how can they be honored? And I just want to say, I think as long as someone is living and breathing, these domains are still, they still apply to every living person. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper to see how you can answer these questions, but it's, I challenge you to do that. So for autonomy, does the person that you're caring for, do they have autonomy in their daily life? And in what ways can you offer choices to them? Does the person that you're caring for feel secure? Does the person you're caring for feel connected to anything or to anyone? Are they oriented? And if not, how can you help them feel anchored to this world? Is there a way that you can engage them in meaningful activity or help them feel like they belong? What is their meaning in life? Can they identify their purpose? And are there any ways that you can help them feel more significant? Does the person that you're caring for experience moments of joy and contentment? Is there something small that can be offered to elicit pleasure or happiness? Maybe a kind word or a gentle touch. I think simply just looking them in the eye to really see them and to make them feel like that they matter. And next slide, please. So once the unmet need or losses have been identified, then the caregiver can respond to the person with dementia's needs by using person-centered care in the following ways. We talked about this a little bit, but by enhancing communication with eye contact, so being either at or below the person with dementia, so you don't create a power struggle. It's using soft touch and talking with a clear and soft tone, creating a safe environment free of tripping hazards and clutter, increase or decrease the stimulation in the environment. Like I said before, a noisy or cluttered environment, it can cause a lot of stress for a person with dementia because they may not be able to self-regulate. Also, simplifying the task that you're asking the person with dementia to do. So try to communicate with one direct statement or with a yes or no question, and then wait. Sometimes we don't give the person with dementia enough time to process what we've asked them. And by the time they have processed it, we've already gone on and asked another question. Create meaningful activities for the person with dementia. So it doesn't matter if the activity is meaningful to the caregiver, it needs to be meaningful to the person with dementia. And this is why you'll sometimes see a person with dementia, an older adult, holding a baby doll or a stuffed animal. And that's because they're getting meaningful feedback from that experience. And then providing opportunities for the person with dementia to make their own decisions, to have choices and determination, self-determination as much as possible. Next slide, please. So one of the best ways that we can support the caregiver and the person with dementia is by developing a care plan. And I know that, again, one of the reasons Kensington Place is so successful in caring for the residents is because of their person-centered care planning. So care plans can be created for the person with dementia living in any environment, whether that's in their own home or in a senior living community. But the goal is to optimize function and quality of life. And each care plan needs to be customized to each individual. So overall, looking at a high level, care plans should have some form of the following. They need to have a structured daily schedule with meaningful engagement, exercise, and cognitive stimulation. They need to address proper sleep, hygiene, a healthy diet, and medication management. And then there needs to be some way to reduce safety risks. So if that's whether either an emergency response system to automatically detect falls or to locate a person if they were to get lost, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, possibly automatic stove shutoff valves, someone overseeing their finances and medications, and someone to assist with care coordination and medical appointments. And if the person is still driving, and if there are concerns that need to be discussed, you can discuss those with the medical doctor, or a driving test can be scheduled. And support and education for the caregiver and other family members through caregiver support groups and workshops, family meetings, and home visits are also key. Next slide, please. So we talked about a lot of negative things, but I want to say before we end on a positive note that caregiving can be very rewarding. Next slide, please. The National Opinion Research Center found that 83% of surveyed family caregivers said that caregiving overall was a positive experience. 75% of caregivers said that the experience strengthened their personal relationship with the care recipient. And I've heard that multiple times, that if there's been a difficult relationship and you're now the caregiver, it almost gives you a new lease or a fresh start. And you can find, you can almost reset that relationship. 50% of caregivers surveyed said that the caregiver role gave them a sense of purpose or meaning. And adult children are often glad that they're able to give back to their parents who once took care of them. Spouses and partners state that if the situation were reversed, they know that their spouse or partner would do the exact same thing for them. And some cultures do take honor in caring for their loved one. They may deem it taboo to put a person with dementia or their loved one in a care facility. And so they really do take honor in that. Next slide, please. And in closing, I'd like to share this quote from Rosalind Carter, who said that there are 4 kinds of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who currently are caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. So in other words, caregiving will touch us all. Next slide, please. There's a list of references, and then the next slide is my contact information, and I'm happy to, connect with anyone at any time. So now I will, I'd like to introduce Anya, and I believe, so Anya is the Director of Community Relations at Kensington Place. She, as a caregiver for her grandparents, she understands the journey of aging and the responsibility of making sound decisions on their behalf. With over 10 years of experience in sales and marketing, she understands standards of excellence to confidently promote Kensington Place as best-in-class dedicated memory care. Please join us, Anya.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who's attending today. We've had quite a bit of questions come in, and I will read some of them right now. So the first one is, my girlfriend suffered a stroke in 2018. She is a younger case, early 40s. I've heard that dementia is more prevalent in stroke victims, but does it affect young people like her? Thank you.
It definitely can. I think it depends on what actually happened in her brain. And I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't feel that I can speak to that too much, but to me, with all the families that I've worked with, I think what matters the most is not so much the diagnosis or what actually, what we call everything, but I think it's how it's impacted the person's life. So the things that we talked about today can absolutely still be beneficial for her, looking at what her needs are, the person-centered care, providing her opportunities to engage in her life as much as possible, maybe talking with her family and friends about that. It's hard to know. I think I would recommend that she definitely see a neurologist and get an MRI and go through some neuropsychological testing, and then they can get a better sense of what's happening.
Thank you, Jenny. Another question from the audience. This is uncharted territory for me, and I want to provide him with the comfort and support that he needs. Endless monologues don't seem quite right. Quietly holding his hand also doesn't seem sufficient. Specifically, how do we best support and comfort him at this time? And how do you say goodbye to someone when you're really not sure about how to say goodbye? He seems stable, but does he really understand what is going on?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I want you to know that, this is really uncharted territory for most people until they're in it for the first time. And it's okay to make mistakes. We're all human. You're just being there and just asking this question shows how much you really care. So I want you to know that you are, just by asking this and being aware of this, you're doing a great job caregiving. The endless monologues, that's the person-centered care piece. If that is not helpful to that person that you're caring for, and it doesn't work, you don't feel like you're getting feedback, you don't feel like you're actually meeting their needs, there's no right way to do this. Caregiving is so individual. Person-centered care, that's what it is individual. So quietly holding his hand, that really works for some people. But if you don't feel that that's working for you, then just stop it. It's okay to stop. I think the best way to support and comfort your loved one right now is to really look at other times in his life that he's been maybe in a state of needing assistance or needing help. If you can look back, if you know his life history, you want to really understand who he is, who he was, how did he receive help in the past. I think it is going to, there's many different things you can do and you can try, and some days some things will work and some days they won't. But I think reminiscence therapy is really, really powerful. So looking at old photographs, talking about a time and a place where he felt very anchored to this world, a time that he felt very confident in his life, maybe when he was in his early 20s, 30s, 40s, those times. And I think the whole part of saying goodbye when you're not sure that they understand, I think on the level of our souls, I think that we do understand things that we will never be able to express verbally. And that's why I think quietly holding someone's hand, that for some people that makes them feel that they are connecting. I think that when it's okay to say goodbye, and you can either come out and just say it, you can tell someone it's okay to go. You've given me everything that I need. I thank you so much for what you've given me, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, whoever this person is. Having open and honest conversations, it actually helps people as they are dying. So it's absolutely okay to do that. I don't think there's too many things that you can do wrong at this stage. Music is another thing that's really, really wonderful. And there's a really great documentary called Alive Inside that talks about the power of music. It talks back all the way to when babies are in their mother's womb. The first beat that they hear is their mother's heartbeat. And so there's some type of imprinting that goes on. I don't know or understand the whole science about it, but there's some kind of imprinting that goes on with music. So I think playing their favorite music, aromatherapy, if that's something that could maybe work for them. These are all ways to comfort them and to support them. Just being there with them. You don't always have to say anything. Sometimes just being quiet and being there with them is actually really helpful as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Going back to the same person who asked this question, two more. Mm-hmm. Is it okay to talk about the fact that he may be dying? And recently, I've been reading short stories from Hemingway. Many of them have themes that have to do with dying and death. Is this subject matter advisable for my family member?
Yeah, I think, you can also tell how someone, if they're not able to verbally tell you how they're feeling, you can tell with their body language. They can get a grimace, you can see them moving. You can use that as feedback. You can read, maybe if there's something that they liked when they were in their childhood or their early adulthood. If you had old family letters that they wrote, letters that people wrote to them, reading those things are wonderful. I think, yeah, poetry can be good. Hemingway, if he likes Hemingway, I think that's absolutely fine to read that. Talking about death, it's kind of a taboo topic in our culture, but it's actually something that it's okay to talk about. And I think it really helps when people are dying, it really helps them to talk about it, to not be scared of it. There's a lot of great resources about that. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head, one of the resources, I think it's Barbara Kanes, Kanes. She has a whole bunch of great resources for hospice care. So I think that would be maybe helpful to look into.
Thank you, Jenny. Just for the audience, we are live, so if anybody would like to ask any questions, feel free at this time. Moving on to the next question, what kind of changes and conditions should I anticipate as a caregiver? Moreover, caring for a loved one with dementia.
You know, it's so personal. It's always such a hard question because we can never know how this is going to affect each individual. But I would say overall, changes in conditions that you could anticipate would be if someone is no longer able to perform some of those instrumental activities of daily living. Those are the things that you might see change first. You know, if someone is forgetting how to, if they were always able to cook, and they were cooking for themselves, but they forgot, or you could tell that they were having more difficulty with the steps, knowing what to go get from the grocery store, how to put a menu together, or how to follow a recipe, something like that. Or if someone seems to think that, or maybe they forget, you know, where they were going that day. If you start to sense a lot of confusion in a lot of those instrumental activities of daily living, I think maybe that's when you should step in or reach out for some help. Living with dementia, you know, some people will be functional with their ADLs for almost ever. Some people may never need assistance with bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting. Some people may need help with that. It just depends. It progresses at different rates. It depends on what the diagnosis is. It depends on, you know, the changes in the brain. I'm sorry, I don't know that I can answer that any better than that. It's very individual.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. Furthermore, what type of specialist should we see when my father has rapidly declined? So I believe it is for those who have been diagnosed but are looking for more answers. What type of specialist should this family see?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm glad we're going to talk about that. A lot of primary care physicians in the United States, they don't diagnose, they don't make a diagnosis of dementia. There's just not a lot of training that goes into primary care. So I think even if you did get a diagnosis of a cognitive impairment or dementia, it's very important to also see a specialist in neurology. So either a neurologist or specifically someone that specializes in memory disorders. And at Stanford, we have the Center for Memory Disorders through Stanford Neurology. I know you guys are very well connected with them at Kensington. Also a neuropsychological testing, it's 4-hour testing, but they can give you great insight into the different domains that may be impaired or impacted. And so that can be very helpful for family members. You know, a lot of times I'll hear, well, I think she's doing that on purpose because she's able to make her breakfast or she's able to, you know, write a thank you note, but she's doing that on purpose. She's trying to annoy me. And neuropsych testing can really give us great insight into someone's brain and the different domains. So yes, they may still be able to do some of these things, but then a different domain can be impaired. And I think families really appreciate that because they can understand, oh, you know, that she wasn't doing that on purpose. And it can make the relationship a little easier. I also think that geriatric care managers can be very helpful. That's more when you actually need help to figure out what's going on. You know, we have the diagnosis, we know what's happening, but these specialists can help us with the management of the side effects of or the symptoms of the disease.
Thank you, Jenny. This is a great question. How can I identify signs when in-home memory care is not an option? I believe this is talking about private duty at home. Furthermore, what are the benefits of memory care in a community such as Kensington Place? And I can answer the second part of that question.
Okay.
And have Greg also chime in, but if you can answer the first part.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, you know, I would say that's pretty typical that first people will try to bring care into their home. I would say when that's no longer working or when that's maybe not the best idea is when the caregiver is just completely overwhelmed, because it's extremely important for the caregiver to continue their path of life. And I say this all the time to family caregivers. You are not only a caregiver or a spouse, or if you're a spousal caregiver or an adult child, but you are also a partner to someone, a daughter or a son to someone, a parent to someone, a niece, a nephew, a friend, a volunteer, a neighbor. You're all these other roles. And so when you only focus on being a caregiver, you are really just completely stopping that other part of life. And if this person that you're caring for passes away before you do, you're going to have a big, vacuum in your life of something that's not fulfilled. So I think if you do bring care into the home, that can be great, especially if that's what the person's wishes are. But once it gets to the point where they need 24-hour care, or you just feel like you are managing every little thing that's going on, I think it's great to look into a memory care community. And I'll even go a little bit further than that. And I'll say, I think memory care communities are great even before getting care into the home. It can be a really great offering. And I think touring places and talking to them, finding out what they offer is really important. And I'll stop talking on that because I'm not the expert in that. I'll let you guys continue that. But, I think, yeah, absolutely. There's not one right time, but.
Thank you. I will say something. What I find successful is when families look ahead and tour ahead, maybe 6 to 12 months before considering even moving into a memory care or assisted living, because we are very well prepared. In terms of the whole memory care aspect, who we are as Kensington is that we are a designated memory care. So we have 2 different neighborhoods. The first one is called Connections, and that is for residents with beginning to mid-stage dementia. And then we also have Haven. Haven is for the more advanced, so you have your mid to late stage. The benefits of memory care for people diagnosed with dementia is that we offer extensive support programs. So we have wheelchair assistance, we have 2 to 3 person transfer, wound care. These aspects are very important. And also we do have individualized service plans, just like we spoke on about half an hour ago. And these are really tailored to personal wants and physical and cognitive and social and emotional and spiritual needs. And that comprehensive and ongoing care program is just really important because it is geared towards memory care. And then we also have the regular family nights and support groups, and we're watching one right now. This is very good for the soul because we are all in this together. 2 more things, and then I will hand it off to Greg, is that we offer pocket programming, which will enable each resident to participate in small group activities. So for example, if a resident really enjoyed gardening, we have a floral arrangement program, a horticulture program for that specific resident. And then our staff to resident ratios are one of the highest in the county, which is pretty good for that care level. And I'll hand it over to Greg at this moment.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you, Jenny. I'll just recap basically the comments that have been made here, but try to break it down into the 3 reasons, the combination of Jenny and Anya. Safety for the loved one, skill of the care team, and quality of the family relationship. Safety, even if your loved one's diagnosed with dementia or mild cognitive impairment, the statistics on elopement at the home increases, the statistics on chancing to harm themselves or others increases, and the quality of life is not where it could be, if it was in a community. Skill of the care team, right? Being a dedicated memory care community like Kensington, our team members and our family members, our leaders are all trained on different techniques where we support your loved one without compromising their dignity. And that's really important because we're not trying to make them into something we can't heal them, because if we are, dementia would have been gone by now, but we're meeting them where they are and taking care of them as they are. And then, of course, the quality of the family relationship, just like Jenny said, I can't, express how often I've seen family members that are, consistently mentioning, just like Jenny has, about anger, frustration, guilt, sadness. And all of those emotions can take a toll when you're trying to care for someone, and you kind of lose sight of that. You become blinded and fogged by what was, because you're so focused on what's going on right now. And although all those feelings are valid, it does compromise taking care of your loved one. And in a memory care community like this, we're able to enjoy your loved one and take care of them. And all you need to do is show up and love them. So overall, having your loved one age in place in a community like Kensington, where they're supported, loved, and cared, is appropriate.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Greg. So we will be ending our presentation for today. We would like to thank everybody for their attendance. Jennie, Clark, and Stanford, thank you so much. On behalf of Kensington Place Memory Care, we are pleased to offer Jennie Clark and her team respite hours. We're working very closely with our healthcare partners to offer this gift. So Jennie, I will be in touch with you. It is an honor and privilege to have you with us today, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you very much.